In the name of one God, Creator, Redeemer, and Sustainer. Amen. Paul didn't have everything figured out ahead of time. Far from it. He and Silas and Timothy set out from Jerusalem on a tour, intending to visit all the places and people who had heard about Jesus and to see how they were doing. But when they were about to go into Asia, Paul felt as though the Spirit was blocking their way. That night he had a dream in which a man came to him and said, "Come over to Macedonia and help us." Believing that this change of direction was from God, they immediately went there, to the city of Philippi. They supposed there was a place of prayer by the river, and so they went there on the Sabbath to look for the man who had appeared to Paul in the dream. Instead, they found a group of women, including Lydia, a wealthy seller of purple cloth, whose heart was open to hear the good news of Jesus the Christ. After she and her family were baptized, Lydia opened her home to the weary travelers. Lydia was not what the apostles were expecting, but by staying open to God's creative vision, they were rewarded with her surprising generosity and hospitality. And Lydia's home became a place of worship. This week we celebrate the 200th anniversary of this building where we worship. For 7 years, the members of the Episcopal Society of North Branford worshipped in one another's homes before beginning their construction of this structure. I love seeing the early photographs of this building set on a one-lane country road that's now Route 80 and Route 139. The people of Zion from that time could not possibly have imagined all the things that God would do in and through this community in the 200 years since. But they listened to the vision that called them to do a new thing. They didn't even have the money to complete this building for several years, but they got started anyway. Over the years, there have been many plans made by the Zion Parish that have succeeded, and others which have failed to come to pass. But through it all, faithful disciples have continued to listen for the voice of God, who calls us out of our places of comfort into the new realms where God intends for us to grow. It's important to remember that what become known as Paul's missionary journeys in the book of the Acts of the Apostles were not just undertaken by Paul alone. He had his companions on the way. Christians at that time were actually called people of the way. They were dedicated to following Jesus, but they never did this alone. And of course, all the movement recorded in the book of Acts was directed by the Spirit of Jesus through dreams, nudges on their hearts, feelings that maybe they shouldn't do something after all, or unexpected turns of events. The apostles were people of prayer who had learned to listen to all the ways in which the Holy Spirit would guide them along their way. And there were people who listened to the teaching of Jesus, and so they knew their ultimate mission and purpose. In today's gospel, we hear from Jesus on the night before he died. He reminds his friends that he does not give as the world gives. He intends to give them a peace that is more than the absence of war. He will give a peace that's deeper than the numbness of complacency, distractions, or material comforts. Jesus will give his disciples his shalom, a peace given for the whole world, reconciliation with God and all people. Jesus tells his friends that they will know that they're on the right way to his shalom, because those who love me will keep my word, and my Father will love them, and we will come to them and make our home with them. When we receive God's shalom, we will be at home with God. We'll be at home with ourselves and with others and all creation. This is the life that God intends for us. Following this peace of Christ, this way of shalom, enabled Paul, Silas, and Timothy to set out for parts unknown and to bring the message of God's love to people who were eager for it. God has surprises in store for us. When we listen to God's call on our hearts, when we are open to God's creative vision for our lives and for our community, we might be sent in directions we had not intended and be introduced to people we had not expected. This is the adventure that Zion undertook 200 years ago and is still about today. To know the peace of Christ and to give it to others. The world aches more than ever for the love and peace of God, that peace that passes understanding. May we ever remember that this is our purpose as a community, to be instruments of God's peace. And I invite you at this time to take your Book of Common Prayer and turn to page 833. And please pray with me the prayer attributed to St. Francis of Assisi. 833. Lord, make us instruments of your peace. Where there is hatred, let us sow love. Where there is injury, pardon. Where there is discord, union. Where there is doubt, faith. Where there is despair, hope. Where there is darkness, light. Where there is sadness, joy. Grant that we may not so much seek to be consoled as to console, to be understood as to understand, to be loved as to love. For it is in giving that we receive, it is in pardoning that we are pardoned, and it is in dying that we are born to eternal life. Amen.